Welcome to Archilingua.
The podcast for architects who want to master professional English. Today, we're exploring a fundamental question. How should architects best present their work?
This topic came up after I read an interesting article online titled Architectural Presentation to Clients. It really got me thinking about how we communicate our ideas. It's not just about the design itself, but about how we frame it for others.
Exactly. The article highlighted that a presentation is more than just a showcase of work. It's about convincing clients and stakeholders of a project's value, not just its form. It's a crucial part of our job.
The first point from the article that stood out to me was the emphasis on creating a clear narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to just show renderings and floor plans. You have to tell a story about the project, the why behind the design choices, the problem it solves, the experience it will create.
Right. A strong concept is the anchor for that story. It gives the client something to hold on to, a core idea that guides the entire project. Without that narrative, it's just a collection of drawings that doesn't connect on an emotional level.
And clients often make decisions based on that connection. For example, instead of saying, "This is the living room," you could say, "This is where your family will gather, with morning light flooding in from the east." That's storytelling.
That's a perfect example. It frames the space around an experience. And of course, the visuals are central to telling that story effectively.
Of course, we're visual thinkers, and so are many of our clients. A powerful rendering can evoke an emotion or a feeling that words alone can't capture. It makes the abstract tangible.
That makes sense. It brings the project to life before a single brick is laid. Another key takeaway from me was the idea of tailoring the presentation to the audience.
Right.
We don't speak the same way to a client as we do to a contractor or an investor. It's about understanding their priorities.
I agree. The article made a great point about that. With clients, you might focus on their needs and the experience of the space. For an investor, the story might be about return on investment, whereas for a city planning committee, the focus is on community impact.
Exactly. And with contractors, you have to shift the emphasis to the technical details, materials, construction methods, feasibility. It's a completely different language, even if it's about the same project.
And that brings up the final point I was thinking about, the balance between technical detail and keeping the message simple. It's a fine line to walk.
It really is. You need to demonstrate professionalism and show that the design is feasible, but you don't want to overwhelm the client with jargon or overly complex drawings.
Exactly. The goal is clarity. You want them to grasp the vision, not get lost in the specifications. So the presentation has to be both persuasive and accessible.
That was a good discussion. Now let's take a moment to break down some of the key phrases we used. This is a great way for our listeners to build their professional vocabulary. There's another aspect the article touched on that we haven't mentioned yet, the importance of active listening during a presentation. It's not just about talking, it's about creating a dialogue.
Good idea. The first one I noted was to frame an idea. I said we need to think about how we frame our ideas. What does that mean exactly?
When you frame something, you're presenting it in a particular way to influence how people perceive it. So framing an idea isn't just about stating it. It's about giving it context and a specific perspective that makes it easier to understand and accept. For example, you might say, let's frame this design choice in terms of energy efficiency to focus the conversation on that specific benefit.
Right, like putting a frame around a picture to highlight it. The next phrase is a core idea. You mentioned that a strong concept is the core idea of a project.
Yes. Core means central or most important. So the core idea is the fundamental concept or principle that everything else is built around. It's the heart of the project. For instance, the core idea of a library might be a hub for community learning, not just a building to store books.
That's a good explanation. Another one was to make the abstract tangible. We said a good rendering makes the abstract tangible.
This is a great one for architects. Abstract refers to something that exists as an idea but doesn't have a physical form. Tangible means something you can touch or experience physically. So when we make something tangible, we are making an idea feel real. Architectural models, for example, make the abstract concept of a three-dimensional space tangible for a client who can't read floor plans.
Excellent. Okay, number 4.
To shift the emphasis. We talked about how we shift the emphasis when speaking to contractors versus clients.
This means to change the focus or importance from one thing to another. So instead of focusing on the user experience with the client, we shift our emphasis to construction details when we talk with the contractor. We are simply changing what we highlight as most important for that specific audience.
Perfect. And the last one, a fine line to walk. I said that balancing simplicity and detail is a fine line to walk.
This is an idiom and a very useful one. It describes a situation where you must be very careful not to do too much of one thing or the other, because the difference between success and failure is very small. For instance, trying to create a design that is both highly innovative and extremely low cost can be a very fine line to walk.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Archilingua. We hope this has been useful.
You can find a full transcript and vocabulary list for this episode in the video description. In our next episode, we'll be discussing common architectural expressions you might hear in the office.
Please subscribe and hit the like button if you found this helpful. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave your feedback in the comments below. Both positive and negative feedback helps us improve.
Thanks for listening.